On a Legionella Risk Assessment report created using our app, Flow Mobile Surveying, you can optionally choose to include an overall risk. So this is a single risk that summarises the entire report. Now, not every risk assessor likes to do this. The reason being that it can sometimes be a bit misleading and people do things in different ways. So for example, you might say that the highest risk on a report is critical, therefore you summarise the report as an overall critical. However, you might say the majority of risks are in the high risk category, so you want to summarise it as a high risk, even though there are some critical risks. So you can see already that this does depend on the risk assessor's personal preference, therefore it might change from one assessor to the other. Now, if you don't include an overall risk, you'll still see the risks on the report, which relate to the specific item risks and the general risks. And these are totaled up like so. You'll also see the breakdown of those risks here. So for example, we can see those individual item specific risks and the general risks here. But like I say, there is no single risk. So let's go ahead and we'll add an overall risk to this report. The way you do that is to navigate to the overall risk section and tick this box here. I'm not going to fill the rest of this in for now. I'm going to show you what happens if we just save it. So as soon as we save this, we've got this new table which says overall risk, and you can see that we have these TBC cells telling us there's something still to be confirmed. Now let's go back into this section and we'll start filling in some of those risk components. So you can see this one here relating to contamination is this one here. So I'm going to say the contamination risk is high. We'll say the amplification risk is high. Transmission, let's say critical. And we just work our way through this. Remember, we're looking at the current risk of the site. So let's go ahead and give this an overall high and hit save. So this is what you're going to be presented with. We've got the overall risk showing as high, and it's made up of these risk factors here. Now, an additional thing you may want to do is to include the inherent risk and the controlled risk. I'm going to start with the inherent risk. Again, let's go ahead and we'll score this up. You'd expect that the inherent risk is going to be higher than the current risk, so let's go ahead and put those in. It's going to be higher than or the same, I suppose. So let's go ahead, save those, and you can see we've got this extra column. So we have this inherent risk on the left hand side, which is critical, and the current risk is lower because there is some work being done on the site to control those risks. So let's go ahead and put in the fully controlled risk now. So we'd expect this to be lower still. And I'm just going to put some random values in here. But I'm going to say that overall the fully controlled risk would be moderate, just based on this site. So there you go. We now have these three columns. Now the center column is what's happening at the moment. The column on the left is the inherent risk, and the column on the right is the controlled risk if everything's been done correctly. So like you can see, we've made this as flexible as possible. So you could just include the current risk if that's your preference. You could also include the inherent and the controlled risk, or the controlled risk if you want. And finally, if you don't want to include an overall risk at all, that's also absolutely fine. You just don't check that box, and you'll still have the specific item risks, the general risks, and any other notable risks within the report, for example, items that can't be accessed for servicing. Lastly, I just want to point out that we can change this however you want. If your process is a little bit different, let us know and we can customize this to your requirements. Every risk assessor is likely to have a slightly different process, so please don't be afraid to contact our support team and ask for the changes you need. Last thing I want to show you is a bit of a shortcut. So for example, if we're doing the same thing time and time again, I'm just going to remove this for now. Then we also have this quick fill, so we can select inherent, current and control risk, and it's going to select those for us. So it's not going to save too much time, but it is helpful if you're doing this every day. You don't want to have to be ticking them every single time. We can also customize different things within this report. For example, if you had an extra text field and you wanted that populated in a specific way, then we could easily do that for you using this quick fill. So just to recap, you don't have to include an overall risk. If you do though, it's going to appear here at the top of the report in the executive summary, and it's going to give you a single risk score for the entire report. If you don't include it though, that's absolutely no problem. You'll still see the specific risks and the general risks within your report.